some neighbors smile at you during the day, then stand outside your house at 3 a.m. watching your windows. Tonight, I'm sharing 3 true scary neighbor stories that will make you check who lives next door. When I moved into my apartment in Indianapolis, I thought I'd finally found somewhere peaceful. The building was old but clean. Only 3 floors, no elevators, quiet tenants. Most people kept to themselves. After living with loud roommates for years, that sounded perfect to me. My unit was on the 3rd floor, directly across from apartment 3B. That was where I first saw him. The guy across the hall looked to be in his late 50s. Thin, pale, always wearing gray sweatpants and an oversized hoodie no matter how warm it was outside. The first thing I noticed wasn't how he looked. It was the staring. The day I moved in, I carried a box upstairs and saw him standing halfway inside his doorway, just watching me. No smile, no greeting, just staring like he'd been waiting for someone to arrive. I nodded politely. "Hey." He didn't respond, just slowly closed the door. I remember laughing about it later because every apartment building has at least one weird tenant. At least that's what I thought. The next few days were normal. I worked from home doing IT support, mostly night shifts, so I usually stayed awake later than most people in the building. Around midnight on my 4th night there, I went to take trash out. When I stepped into the hallway, I froze. The man from 3B was standing at the far end of the hall near the stairs, in total darkness. No lights on, just standing there. I almost jumped. He slowly turned his head toward me. "Late night?" he asked. His voice sounded rough, like he hadn't spoken in days. Yeah." Then he asked something strange. "You live alone?" I laughed awkwardly. "Yeah." He nodded slowly like that answer mattered. Then he walked downstairs. I stood there for a second, feeling weirdly unsettled. After that, I started noticing him more often. Every time I came home, his door would crack open slightly. Not enough to fully see him, just enough to know he was there. Watching. One night I ordered pizza around 1 a.m. As soon as the delivery driver knocked, I heard movement across the hall. The door to 3B opened just an inch. An eye stared through the gap. The delivery guy even noticed it. "You know that dude?" he asked quietly. "No." "Creepy as hell." I laughed it off again, but deep down, I agreed. Things got worse 2 weeks later. I woke up around 3 a.m. to a metallic sound outside my apartment. At first I thought someone dropped keys. Then I heard it again. A soft rattling noise. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. My stomach dropped. The man from 3B was crouched in front of my doorknob, moving it slowly back and forth, testing it. I stumbled backward instinctively. The floor creaked beneath me. The rattling stopped immediately. Then I heard him whisper through the door, "I know you're awake." Every hair on my arm stood up. I didn't move, didn't breathe. After maybe 20 seconds, I heard slow footsteps walking back across the hall. I waited another 10 minutes before checking again. The hallway was empty. The next morning, I reported it to the landlord. She sighed like she'd heard complaints before. "That's Leonard," she said. "He's harmless." Harmless. That word stayed in my head all day, because harmless people don't test strangers' door handles at 3 in the morning. That night, I shoved a chair beneath my doorknob before sleeping. Around 2:40 a.m., I woke up suddenly. Silence. Then, 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, knock. I stared at the ceiling. Another 3 knocks followed. Then his voice. "I need help." I didn't answer. "I know you're in there." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. Then came scratching. Soft at first, like fingernails dragging lightly across wood. It continued for nearly a minute, then stopped completely. The next morning I found thin scratch marks around the bottom of my door. That was enough for me. I bought a small security camera and pointed it toward the entrance. 2 nights later, the motion alert woke me at 3:12 a.m. I opened the app. Leonard stood inches from my door, completely motionless, just staring directly into the camera. For 7 full minutes, he didn't move once. Not blinking. Not shifting. Nothing. Then suddenly he leaned closer and whispered something. The microphone barely caught it. "You shouldn't have done that." Then he walked away. I called the police immediately. When officers arrived, they knocked on 3B several times. No answer. Eventually, maintenance unlocked the apartment. The police searched the place for less than 5 minutes before one officer came back out looking disturbed. Leonard was gone. But the apartment was horrifying. No furniture except a mattress. Dozens of photos taped to the walls. Every single one taken through apartment peepholes or windows. Pictures of tenants, including me. Some photos showed me sleeping at my desk through my apartment window. Others showed me bringing groceries upstairs. One picture had been taken from directly behind me while I unlocked my front door. The police never found him. I moved out 2 days later. About 6 months after leaving, I got a message from another former tenant. Leonard had apparently returned to the building one night. Only briefly. Long enough for security cameras to catch him standing outside my old apartment, just staring at the door again, even though nobody lived there anymore. My parents bought our house in northern Ohio during my junior year of high school. The neighborhood was exactly what my mom always wanted. Quiet streets, trimmed lawns, kids riding bikes before sunset, and neighbors who waved whenever you drove past. Nothing about the place felt dangerous. That's probably why nobody paid attention to Mr. Callahan at first. He lived directly behind us, in a pale yellow house, separated by a chain-link fence and a narrow strip of woods. He was older, maybe in his early 60s, tall and skinny with gray hair that always looked wet even when it hadn't rained. The first time I met him, he appeared in our backyard while my dad was grilling burgers. "You folks settling in okay?" he asked with a smile. He seemed normal enough, friendly even. My dad liked him immediately. Looking back now, I think the reason he scared me so much later on was because he never acted creepy in obvious ways at the beginning. He acted helpful. Too helpful. Every morning before school, I'd see him standing outside watering plants that didn't even look real. He always knew where everyone in the neighborhood was. "Your dad got home late yesterday," he once told me casually while I grabbed the mail. I remember laughing awkwardly. "Yeah, work stuff." Another time he said, "Your mom leaves around 7:15 every morning, right?" That one made me pause. I asked, "How do you know that?" He smiled. "I notice patterns." At first I brushed it off because old people are nosy sometimes. My parents definitely didn't think anything was wrong. But then there was the floodlight. Every single night around midnight, the giant light behind his garage switched on. And it stayed on until sunrise. It was bright enough to shine through my bedroom curtains. Sometimes I'd wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning with my entire room glowing pale yellow. One night I looked out the window and saw him standing beneath the light, not moving, just staring toward our house. I figured maybe he couldn't sleep. Still, something about it bothered me. A few weeks later, my parents went away for the weekend to visit relatives in Columbus, leaving me home alone for 2 nights. Before leaving, my mom told me to lock everything and not invite friends over. The first night was normal. I ordered pizza, played Xbox downstairs, and stayed up way too late watching horror videos online. Around 12:40 a.m., the backyard floodlight suddenly clicked on. I remember because the kitchen brightened instantly. I looked through the window expecting to see Mr. Callahan gardening or smoking like usual. Instead, he stood directly against the fence, facing my bedroom window upstairs. I stared for a few seconds before opening the back door slightly. "You okay, Mr. Callahan?" He turned slowly toward me. "You should lock your upstairs windows tonight." I frowned. "They are locked." "No," he said quietly. "One isn't." Then he walked back toward his house. I felt uneasy immediately. I ran upstairs and checked every room. My parents' windows were locked. The guest room was locked. But mine wasn't. Not only that, the screen had been pushed slightly upward, like someone had tried removing it. My stomach dropped. I locked the window and shut the blinds completely. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, I convinced myself I was overreacting. Maybe he noticed the screen loose from outside. Maybe he was genuinely trying to help. But after that weekend, weird things started happening constantly. Sometimes I'd wake up and find footprints in the grass beneath my window. Other times, the floodlight would flicker repeatedly around 3 a.m., like someone was signaling. One morning, I found cigarette butts near the side of our house, even though neither of my parents smoked. Then came the night I saw him inside our yard. I was brushing my teeth around midnight when movement outside caught my eye. Mr. Callahan stood beneath my bedroom window, completely still. I froze. He slowly tilted his head upward, like he knew I was watching him. Then he smiled. Not a friendly smile, a huge, unnatural grin. I yelled instinctively, "What the hell are you doing?" The smile disappeared instantly. Without saying a word, he turned and walked calmly back toward the fence. I told my parents everything the next morning. My dad looked angry but skeptical. "He's probably just some lonely old guy," he said. Still, he confronted him later that afternoon. I watched from our kitchen window as they talked near the driveway. At first, Mr. Callahan looked confused, then offended. Then he pointed toward our house, while shaking his head like my dad was accusing him unfairly. When my dad came back inside, he said, "He claims he's never even stepped into our yard." That should have made me feel better. Instead, it made everything worse, because I knew he was lying. For nearly a week after that, the floodlight never came on. The neighborhood felt normal again. I actually started thinking maybe the confrontation scared him enough to stop whatever weird behavior he had going on. Then Saturday night happened. I woke up around 3:10 a.m. to a tapping sound. Soft, rhythmic. Tap, tap, tap. At first I thought it was part of a dream. Then it happened again. I slowly opened my eyes and nearly screamed. Someone was standing outside my second-floor window. Mr. Callahan. He was staring directly into my room, smiling. I couldn't even process how he got up there until I noticed the ladder beside the house. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. Then he raised one hand slowly and tapped the glass again. Tap, tap, tap. I screamed for my parents. The second, my dad shouted from downstairs, Mr. Callahan climbed down the ladder unbelievably fast and disappeared into the darkness. Police arrived within 15 minutes. 2 officers searched around his property while another questioned him at the door. He denied everything. Said he'd been asleep. But then one officer found the ladder hidden behind his garage. And after that, things escalated quickly. Police searched the garage. I'll never forget the expression on the officer's face when he walked back outside. Inside, they found hundreds of photographs, pictures of people throughout the neighborhood. Most were taken through windows at night, families eating dinner, kids sleeping, women changing clothes. There were dozens of photos of me. Some were taken from our backyard. Others were zoomed in through my bedroom window. But the worst thing they found wasn't the pictures. It was a notebook. Page after page of handwritten notes, descriptions of my routines, what time my bedroom light turned off, what nights my parents left the house, what clothes I wore most often. And over again, written across multiple pages, the same sentence. The upstairs girl sees me now. Mr. Callahan was arrested that night. My parents tried acting like everything was okay afterward, but nothing felt normal anymore. 3 months later, we moved away. Before leaving, my dad admitted something he'd hidden from me. Police believed Mr. Callahan had been watching families in that neighborhood for years, and according to one detective, we probably weren't the first family he became obsessed with, maybe not even the worst. I used to live in a townhouse complex outside Portland, Oregon, during my second year of college. The place was cheap, quiet, and close enough to campus that I could drive there in under 15 minutes. Most of the units were occupied by older couples or people who worked night shifts, so the neighborhood usually felt dead after dark. That was one of the reasons I liked it, at least at first. My unit was number 13. The townhouse connected directly beside mine, Unit 14, belonged to a woman named Evelyn. I only learned her name because it was written on a package sitting outside her door during my first week there. Nobody ever really talked to her. People mostly avoided her. Not because she was rude, because she was strange. The first time I saw her, it was almost midnight. I had just come home from work and noticed someone standing perfectly still at the upstairs window of Unit 14. At first, I thought it was a mannequin, or maybe a coat hanging near the curtain. Then the figure moved. Slowly. A pale woman stepped closer to the glass until her face became visible beneath the dim yellow light behind her. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, pale skin, long black hair hanging messily around her face. What bothered me most was the way she stared. Not at the parking lot, not at the street, at me. The second I looked up, it felt like she'd already been watching me for several minutes. I looked away quickly and hurried inside. The next morning, I mentioned her to another tenant while checking mail. The older guy beside me laughed quietly. "Yeah," he said. "That's Evelyn." "What's her deal?" He shrugged. "Who knows? She barely comes outside." "Does she live alone?" "As far as anyone knows." That answer stuck with me for some reason. As far as anyone knows. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing things about Unit 14 that slowly became impossible to ignore. The upstairs bedroom light never turned off. Ever. No matter what time I woke up, midnight, 2 a.m., even sunrise, the light was always glowing faintly through the curtains. And there were noises, constant noises, footsteps upstairs at odd hours, furniture scraping across the floor, soft thumps against the walls. Sometimes it sounded like multiple people walking around. But I never saw anyone visit her. No friends, no family. No deliveries besides occasional grocery bags left at the door. One night around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of crying through the shared wall between our units. At first, I thought maybe someone outside was hurt. Then I realized the sound was coming directly from Evelyn's townhouse. It wasn't loud crying. It sounded controlled, like someone trying desperately not to be heard. The crying continued for almost 20 minutes before stopping abruptly. The silence afterward felt worse. The next morning, I almost knocked on her door to check if she was okay. But before I could, the door opened by itself. Evelyn stood there, already dressed in an oversized gray sweater, despite it being nearly 80 degrees outside. Up close, she looked even more unsettling. Not dangerous, just exhausted. Like she hadn't slept in years. For a few seconds, she simply stared at me without blinking. Then she asked quietly, "Do you ever hear them too?" I frowned. "Hear who?" "The people upstairs." I stared at her. "But you live upstairs." Something about her expression changed slightly when I said that. Not confusion, almost pity. "You shouldn't listen to them," she whispered. Then she slowly closed the door. I remember standing there afterward feeling cold despite the heat outside. That conversation should have been enough for me to stay away from her completely. Instead, it made me curious. Over the following days, I paid more attention to Unit 14, and the more I noticed, the worse it got. Sometimes around midnight, I'd see shadows moving behind Evelyn's upstairs curtains. Not one shadow. Several. Other times, I'd hear footsteps running quickly from one side of her townhouse to the other. One night, I even heard what sounded like whispering through the walls. Multiple voices speaking too quietly to understand. I tried convincing myself it was just thin walls and an overactive imagination. That explanation stopped working during the power outage. It happened during a thunderstorm in October. Around 1 a.m., the entire complex lost electricity. Everything went black instantly. No porch lights, no TVs, no street lights. I walked downstairs and looked outside through the kitchen window. Most of the neighborhood was dark, except for occasional phone flashlights moving around. Then I noticed Unit 14, specifically the upstairs window. A silhouette stood perfectly still behind the curtain. I froze immediately. There was no light inside the townhouse, no candles, no flashlights, nothing. Yet somehow, I could still see the outline of someone standing there, watching my house. Lightning flashed outside. For half a second, the entire parking lot lit up bright white, and in that instant, I saw her clearly. Evelyn stood upstairs, staring directly toward my kitchen window, smiling. The power returned seconds later. The upstairs curtain snapped shut immediately. I barely slept that night. The following evening, I came home from class around 11 p.m. and found Evelyn standing outside beside the mailboxes. She looked startled when she noticed me. "You lost power too?" I asked awkwardly. She nodded slowly. Then she leaned closer. "They move more when it's dark." I forced a nervous laugh. "Who?" Again, that strange expression crossed her face. "The ones inside the walls?" Then she walked away. At that point, I honestly considered contacting property management. Not because I thought she was dangerous, because I thought she might genuinely be mentally ill and living alone. But before I did, things escalated. 3 nights later, I woke up around 2:30 a.m. to a loud bang against the shared wall. Not a knock, a slam. I sat upright instantly. Another bang followed. Then rapid footsteps upstairs. Then whispering. Fast whispering. I couldn't understand any words, but there were definitely multiple voices. Suddenly something heavy crashed onto the floor hard enough to shake my wall frames. Then silence. Complete silence. I almost called the police right then. Before I could decide, I heard a soft scratching noise near my kitchen downstairs. I froze. The scratching continued, slowly, like fingernails dragging across wood. I grabbed my phone flashlight and walked downstairs, trying not to make noise. The scratching stopped the second I reached the kitchen. At first I saw nothing unusual. Then my stomach dropped. The blinds above the kitchen sink were slightly bent apart. Someone had been looking inside. I stepped closer carefully and shined my flashlight through the window. A face stood inches from the glass. I screamed and stumbled backward. It was Evelyn, barefoot, completely soaked from the rain. Her pale face looked almost gray beneath the flashlight beam. For several seconds, she simply stared at me without blinking. Then she whispered something too quietly to hear. I cracked the window slightly. What? Her eyes widened instantly. They know you can hear them now? Then she walked away into the darkness beside the buildings. I locked every door and window in the townhouse after that. The next morning, I contacted property management. The manager looked uncomfortable the moment I mentioned Unit 14. Apparently, other tenants had complained about Evelyn before, mostly about noises at night. One tenant claimed she heard people arguing inside Unit 14, even after Evelyn supposedly left town for a week. Another swore they saw faces staring from the upstairs windows late at night. But officially, Evelyn lived completely alone. 2 days later, police arrived at the complex around dawn. I woke up to flashing lights outside my bedroom window. 3 patrol cars sat outside Unit 14, while officers spoke quietly near the entrance. An ambulance arrived minutes later. Most of the neighbors gathered outside watching. Eventually, officers entered the townhouse. They stayed inside nearly an hour. Nobody came out. Then finally, paramedics escorted Evelyn outside wrapped in a gray blanket. She looked emotionless, not scared, not upset, just tired. As they guided her toward the ambulance, she suddenly stopped walking. Slowly, she turned toward me and smiled. Not a friendly smile, a relieved one, like she was finally leaving something behind. Later that afternoon, rumors spread throughout the complex about what police found inside Unit 14. Most of it was probably exaggerated, but one detail came directly from the property manager himself. The upstairs walls had been covered completely in handwriting. Thousands of sentences written over nearly every surface. Most repeated the same phrase over and over again. They watch through the cracks. But the part that still bothers me happened afterward. Evelyn never returned. The townhouse remained empty for months. No electricity, no tenants, nothing. Yet every now and then, around 3 a.m., the upstairs bedroom light would turn on again. And sometimes, if I looked long enough, I could still see movement behind the curtains.